Good morning. It's Thursday, the 20th of August, 2020. My name is Pete Fairbairn and welcome back to the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. Joining me today, Jim Tucker up here in the Sunshine State. How are you, Jim?
Going extremely well.
It'd be remiss of me not to congratulate you on the show for your recent induction into the Suncorp Stadium Media Wall of Fame. As you just said to me offline, hopefully it guarantees a lifetime of free media sweet pizzas for you, but a wonderful, wonderful achievement. So congratulations, Jim.
Thanks, Peter. A real shock, but I treat it as a great honour with some of those wonderful colleagues that are lucky enough to be on the honour board.
Well said. And if they were doing a Media Wall of Fame down on the Gold Coast at Seabus Stadium, a man who would be in contention for that one would be Vince Rugari, now with the Sydney Morning Herald, but of course a doyen of the defunct Gold Coast United and their tenure in the A-League. But he's written a fantastic story today in the Sydney Morning Herald, which is where we're going to kick things off. It's about media monitoring firm Stream comparing the A-League's share of voice among major print and online publishers during the past 12 months with 5 other major sporting competitions or tournaments. The 5 that they compare it with are the AFL, the NRL Super Rugby, the Big Bash League and the Australian Open Tennis. The angle of the story shows that the A-League's share of mainstream media space has shrunk by more than 2/3 since the COVID shutdown. And that lays bare, I guess, one of the major challenges with the competition looking to shift to a winter competition from its current summer status. We know that the players would prefer to play in winter. It would bring it in line with what really happens with that world game all over the globe. And from a quality perspective, I think over time the A-League would certainly benefit from playing in winter without players completely run off their feet in the Aussie summer. Of course, it does mean it would be up against the AFL, the NRL and Super Rugby. And as this analysis from Stream shows, that's a pretty tough battle to fight. Jim, from your perspective, should the A-League go ahead or should they reconsider the mooted winter switch?
This is a real conundrum. You've seen it in basketball as well. They've been flexible to shift their season around to try and find greater bang in their voice in Australian sport. I think the A-League football have to believe their product is strong enough and just go, we're going to play in winter. Like I think there's crossover rugby union, rugby league, but the A-League is such a unique sport. I'm very comfortable with them playing in winter. I think it connects with juniors who are playing in winter to instantly go and see their heroes at night playing for A-League clubs. I'm very comfortable with them going to winter. I think the quality of the football undoubtedly would be better. The summer, seeing Brisbane Roar games played in the middle of summer in Brisbane, it's ridiculous. They shouldn't be put through it. We're going to see it in Qatar come the Football World Cup coming up. The heat and most footballs just don't mix. So very comfortable with that. But the A-League are going to have to go, okay, well, less voice perhaps, some of the mainstream media, but let's have a look at social media. Let's have a look at how we're connecting with our fans, how our kids are connecting to our A-League clubs.
And that's a battle that they continue to fight anyway. And it's worth acknowledging that their share of voice during the summer months, it's still dwarfed by the AFL trade season, for example, and by the NRL with the build up to the new season. By the time January, February kicks in, the Australian Open and Big Bash, of course, dominate the market share, but the A-League is still dwarfed by those other football codes. So I agree with you completely. I think you've got to look to produce the best possible product. I do believe the A-League may have gone a bit early on expansion in regards to player depth and the fact that they may not be able to afford the type of visa or marquee players that would really elevate that competition. But as a good friend of mine once shared with me his experience of going to Albury on the New South Wales-Victorian border and watching former Chelsea and Arsenal champion William Gallas absolutely suffocating in 42-degree heat playing for the Perth Glory, I don't think that's a spectacle that people want to see. Our second story this morning comes from Jamie Pandaram in the Daily Telegraph. He's got some quotes from Rugby Australia Chairman Hamish McLennan about the eligibility of non-Australian-based players for the mooted State of the Union series, rugby's bold new initiative that they want to get up and off the ground in 2021 with New South Wales taking on Queensland in a State of the Union series. He's talked about the likes of Sean McMahon, Quade Cooper, Will Skelton, all being available for this State of the Union series. Samu Karevi, Bernard Foley, Isaac Rodder, the list goes on and on. As McLennan told Pandaram, why wouldn't you open it up to them? We need more tentpole events baked into the rugby calendar. We'll continue to create more event television for the game. It would certainly add a lot of interest to the game. I want to move away from State of the Union for a moment. Do you think Hamish McLennan's just buttering us up a little bit here to say that Wallaby players should be selected from all over the world, and perhaps we see that Giteau law scrapped over the next couple of years in order to create more compelling content?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Giteau law was brought in really to get Matt Giteau, Drew Mitchell, the likes of those players into the 2015 World Cup. Has it run out of its usefulness? I don't believe so. I think perhaps the mark for test matches, 60 tests, might have to be diluted a little bit. Maybe it's 5 years of service to Australian rugby before you can expand your horizons to go overseas. But I think doing everything possible to keep the best players in the Australian market is essential. Australian sports fans are some of the most fickle in the world. They want to see the best players. They don't want to see a dumbed down competition without the best players. So I think there will be, they'll wind back the Giteau law somewhat, but there'll still be some restrictions in there. To your point on State of the Union, it is rugby origin, which is fantastic. And it means finally, the thing that holds rugby back is so many rules, so many obligations. State of origin rugby, they can do whatever they like. And that needs to be getting the best players in. That would be fantastic. Quade Cooper coming in. First obstacle, if Brad Thorne's coaching Queensland, how does he massage Quade Cooper into a Queensland team, having punted him a couple of years ago? Then you get all the same rugby league themes. Isaac Rodder loves Queensland, but he's from Evans Head in northern New South Wales. So New South Wales would have dibs on him. So some great themes, and it would be fantastic. 3-game series, Hamish McLennan, 5 stars.
McLennan also noting that he'd love to see Bledisloe Cup match played every Anzac Day. I think that's something that, for many of us who've worked within the game in recent years, we look at the Anzac Day AFL match between Essendon and Collingwood and what a major event that's become. And we've often wondered why it couldn't be replicated, in whether it be in Super Rugby or in a test match between Australia and New Zealand as well. So that's one that gets me up and about too. Our third story today comes from Matt Logg via the News Corp Australia Newswire. I'm not going to lie to you, Jim. This one I found it pretty tough to read. It's Manly prop Marty Taupau reflecting on his first concussion in his career. It occurred a fortnight ago when he got a swinging right arm from Warriors forward Jack Hetherington across the face. Taupau detailing just how tough that return from concussion has been for him. He couldn't remember anything for 30 minutes after the hit. He says, I don't really want to reflect on it because it scares me, with the brain being the most important part in my most important organ, in my body. I don't remember at least 20 to 30 minutes. After that, it went downhill. I think it was post-traumatic amnesia, had constant headaches. There are a few short-term memory things. And in fact, Jim, he was so rattled that he took it upon himself to have a CT scan to confirm that there was no bleeding on the brain. He goes on to congratulate the Sydney Roosters for the caution they're taking in Boyd Cordner's return from concussion as that enters its 6th week. Taupau, however, will return for Manly just 2 weeks after this concussion, which has had such a huge impact on his life over the last 2 weeks. And I can't help but ask the question. We saw it again, Brodie Myercheck for Collingwood, a pretty horrible-looking concussion he suffered against Melbourne on the weekend. We know that CTE continues to be a topic we learn more and more about that's affecting former professional athletes from different codes all over the world. Do we need to see sports holding stars back for 3, 4, 5 weeks minimum after they suffer a concussion?
I think that's a very solid question. The great thing about this situation with the Manly prop is that this conversation's happening at his first concussion. It's not happening after his 3rd or 4th concussion, after basically sneaking back on the field or not revealing something at training where he got a knock and tried to play the tough guy and not tell coaches. This conversation is now happening right in broad daylight, which is great for the health and well-being of so many players across all the collision sports. I think in this case, very much so, you've got doctors right at the front line. examining his case. So if those doctors believe he's right in 2 weeks, I'm happy to go with their judgment. If their judgment is 4 weeks, clubs have got to cop it, because the long-term impact of head knocks is really not found out till long after your playing career. My touchstone for this is the former Wallaby Anthony Fainga. He's to donate his brain to science, essentially, to see what impact more than a dozen head knocks and concussions have had over his career. When he got a bad one against the Crusaders a number of years ago, he went to his twin brother Sayer's wedding and couldn't remember all the bits and pieces of that wedding. He had the ring for his brother at the wedding and couldn't quite remember always where it was. He's a telling example. He's got a full life at the moment, but he wants to remember his kids' names and every event in his children's lives, and that is so important. So caution, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's one of those topics similar to mental health, in that attitudes have shifted. Players are more open about it and want to talk more about it, and that's only going to continue. I want to applaud Marty Taupau for his openness, and to your point, 100%. We're not doctors, and you've got to put faith in the Sea Eagles staff there. But I think in general, we might need to see some greater mandatory stand-down periods taking place across all different sports. Our penultimate story today, we turn to your former colleague Robert Craddock in the Courier Mail. He's got a good interview with Australian cricket sensation Marnus Labuschagne, I should say, and even that might not be quite correct, in regards to whether Marnus should be in contention for a leadership position within the Australian cricket team. We know that he's had a phenomenal 18 to 24 months, an extraordinary test batting average of 63, a 50 over average of 50. He's a 26-year-old, a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of coming to international prominence, and Craddock asking him if he would be interested in being involved in conversations about who the next generation of Australian leaders are, with Test captain Tim Paine nearing the end of his international career. I want to ask you though, and Jim, it's worth noting that Labuschagne says, yeah, I'm interested, but it's not what's driving me necessarily. Is it too early to be talking leadership for this young man, or should we just let him focus on maintaining his form first and foremost?
I think you've just got to let him become the batsman he can become. Like he's had that rosy period where he's averaging over 60 in Test cricket, but you'd say the same thing about Matthew Elliott. He had a bat as wide, 2 feet wide at one stage when he dominated that 1997 Ashes tour in England, and he faded after that tour. He got 300s in a year. So Marnus has that wonderful cricket fever about him. So you're getting a guy who just loves cricket and loves scoring runs. Let him do that for as long as possible. I think he has to establish all areas within his game, and then bring him along by giving him some captaincy in Queensland, whether it's the Bulls or the Brisbane Heat side, where all the decisions are running around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The Heat and the international season obviously overlap, so that's maybe a bit trickier. Or the one-day side, give him some captaincy experience first. What he is not budging is Tim Paine's age. He is 35. He's been a brilliant servant to get Australia out of a hideous rut after the ball tampering in South Africa. He might just have that 12 months, 14 months, 2 or 3 series left in him before you do have to look further afield. I don't see an obvious Australian cricket captain for Test matches beyond now. So it is a search, and it will be a constant dialogue, and they'll be looking for someone to fill those big boots.
I think I read yesterday via Ben Hord in the Daily Telegraph that Pat Cummins, obviously the standalone vice captain now for the Australian one-day team behind Aaron Finch there. If he were to get the Test role, it would be 64 years since Australia last had a fast bowler as Test captain. But Cummins is yet to even captain his own state in New South Wales as well. We know Steve Smith becomes eligible to lead his country again, or probably already there, in fact. And that's something to consider, whether you put him back in the role where he did so well, but obviously struggled with some of the expectation, and his judgment is well known from that sandpaper incident in Cape Town. So one to watch closely. I think the most important takeaway I get from that, It's the same thing I think of when I think of Pat Cummins, is he needs practical on-the-job experience, whether that's for his state, whether that's over in county cricket where he's done so well. I don't think you can talk about a bloke leading his country until he's done so at the high level beforehand. Our final topic today, and it's one that you put on the agenda, and I'm not going to lie, I absolutely love it. We saw that Chariots of Fire actor Ben Cross passed away in the last 48 hours, age 72. He was best known for his role in Chariots of Fire, which of course won Best Picture in the Oscars. And you know, from a movie score perspective, the orchestral score of Chariots of Fire is so infamous and you know, probably one of the most played of all time. It's got you thinking about what are your favourite ever sports movies and what the best ones are. I've got a couple up my sleeve, but I'd love to hear yours first, Jim.
Well, I think thematically, boxing, basketball, baseball, they just hit home runs as far as movies go in the sports genre. Bull Durham, loved it. Field of Dreams, brilliant. A League of Their Own, one of the few movies Madonna made that actually resonated. Love those movies. Boxing movie, Raging Bull, absolutely thought that was a cracker. But then you move over to Cool Runnings. I thought that was a brilliant movie for what it did with the Jamaican bobsled team. Australia is strong in this area. Far Lap, fantastic. Australian Dream, semi-documentary about Adam Goods's Rocky Road and tackling the really difficult topic of racism and bringing it in a real conversational way to the forefront. A great movie. And Save Your Legs, loved the cricket one with Stephen Curry, I think it was. So there's some of my favourites, but I'd go baseball one, Field of Dreams. I could listen to James Earl Jones's voice reading any book to me at night.
Yeah, good selection there. You've missed out the cult classic, The Club, from down Victoria way. I would want to say either late 70s, early 80s, but for mine, there's a couple that you've missed as well that are absolute iconic films. The Mighty Ducks, that whole franchise, that never gets old. Blindside, yes, based on an absolutely unbelievable true story. Coach Carter and Samuel L. Jackson in that one, superb. Invictus, I love the story behind the movie. That being said, from a footage perspective, I don't know if Matt Damon would get a game in Premier Club Rugby here in Queensland, but the number one for me has to be Remember the Titans. What an iconic film and an unbelievable true story, and really, I guess, showcased racial tension in the US in the 1960s and how sport was a driver for change. And I think in the current landscape we have with Black Lives Matter, there's a lot of learnings that could be taken from going back and revisiting some of those stories from the civil rights movement, 60 years ago. So that's my selection, Jim, but I love that you put it on the agenda. It's always great to have you on the show. Looking forward to catching up with you again very soon. Thanks so much for being on the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff today.
I'm going to watch Caddyshack right now, just for a laugh. Cheers,
just for a laugh, and then I reckon you'll go and play 18 holes as well. You've been watching or listening to the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. We'll see you tomorrow with the Sydney Morning Herald's Vince Rugari.